BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a couple quick announcements before we begin. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you to everybody who listened to our upload yesterday on the death of Adam Weeks. That's just the title of it, The Death of Adam Weeks. He was a candidate for Congress in Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District, and there was a very tragic, sudden piece of breaking news that we covered involving the death of Adam Weeks, which took place this year in 2020. And in addition to that, another announcement I would like to say is that we will be doing a special thing on the Instagram journal, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram TV. We'll be talking about the case of Elizabeth Smart a little bit more. Originally, we had an upload planned on the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart that took place in the early part of the new millennium, 2002 to 2003, and the abductors Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee. And we'll be discussing the film I Am Elizabeth Smart on the Instagram journal, IGTV, BlackBoxNed88. I was going to do an upload about that, but do you ever just have those moments when you're trying to watch a movie and you can only make it through about 2/3 and I'm like, oh no, I've had enough. But we have covered Elizabeth Smart in the past. We've done 2 uploads on that kidnapping, as well as all of the incidents surrounding Elizabeth Smart, Brian David Mitchell, and Wanda Barzee. One of them is available in the description box here. And the best way you can support this channel is not with money, but just by listening to some more of our content. All you got to do is listen. If you like what you hear, you can share on social media. But really, just listen and check out some more of our uploads. And as always, please like and subscribe. Moving on to the subject that we have for today. First, I would like to begin by saying big shout out to Walter, who left a comment about how I was sending him down the rabbit hole with the Michael Collins Piper material on the Kennedy assassination, as well as the possible connections to the Israeli Mossad. And today is a Saturday at the time of this recording, so I had some time to just go through some of the recordings of Michael Collins Piper. Walter may have even beat me to it to getting to the end first. He said he was staying up till 6 a.m., and I was trying to get through as many as I could. But of course, it does take some time because there was a very large multi-part series on YouTube of radio clips that are put together. But they are from Michael Collins Piper, saying that name one more time if anyone would like to check this stuff out. And let's talk about some possible connections to John F. Kennedy and the Israeli Mossad. Very precisely, the Israeli Mossad has a role in the Kennedy assassination that has gone mostly overlooked. And in one of the previous segments that we did on this is all going to be a multi-part series, but you can listen to these uploads independently. There's the claim that has been made that it's not so much that it is a super hands-on, very simple operation, more about how pro-Israel elements of the CIA and pro-Israel elements of organized crime conspired together to have John F. Kennedy assassinated, something that we can actually approach from an argumentative standpoint. And as I was listening more and more, I wanted to hear some of the particular claims. First and foremost, before I knew I would go off on an enormous tangent if we were going to be talking about the film JFK, the Oliver Stone film with Kevin Costner playing Jim Garrison, the New Orleans attorney. Now, I saw that film, but I have to confess to you, I was watching that one when I was on an airplane, and I fell asleep during it, so I missed a couple sections of it. But the interesting thing about this is, and I knew I said I would go off on tangents, Kevin Costner never does sequels to his films. Have you heard that before? I just thought that was so weird when I read that. And there's even a sequel that they have planned for Dances with Wolves. I mean, it's a novel that has been written. I believe it's called The Holy Road, and they wanted to turn that into a film, but Kevin Costner just doesn't do sequels to his films. I did love Dances with Wolves, the first film, but it's been a while since I've watched that one. But with JFK, what do we make of putting a movie out like that? Because if you get a chance to watch Oliver Stone's JFK, there are a lot of discussions about how the Kennedy assassination is not what we think it is. We explore different theories and such. And there was one comedy show, I don't know if it was SNL or some other one, they said what happened at the Kennedy assassination is for God to know and for Oliver Stone to find out. But some of the things that were shared on during the Michael Collins Piper discussions were that the JFK assassination, I shouldn't say the assassination, the JFK film, which is about the JFK assassination, I'll be precise again. The JFK film was financed by an individual named Arnon Milchan, Milchan, Arnon Milchan. I had never heard of him before I heard that radio upload. You learn new things every day. And he was somebody who has been involved with the financing of a lot of different movies. And what they were saying was, why did this guy want this type of film put out? It is possible that the JFK film that was done by Oliver Stone with Kevin Costner was a disinfo project, trying to completely dissuade people from learning about the connections of the Israeli Mossad to the John F. Kennedy assassination. That's a bold claim. But first and foremost, we should say that Arnon Milchan was born in Palestine, now Israel. He was born in a place called Rehovot, Rehovot, Palestine, Israel, thereabouts. I mean, it was born in 1944, so the borders have changed somewhat. So what we can say is that this is something that you hear about a lot. A lot of these people are being accused of spreading disinfo. A lot of times people are being accused of sharing fraudulent information to pull things to a particular conclusion. And as you'll see here from the title, we're also going to be talking a little bit about 9/11 truth. I just thought it was a good time to finally mention that stuff. When we did our introductory piece, I said we were going to be mentioning a few things associated with 9/11 truth. This is a narrative that gets mentioned very frequently. Because there was a 9/11 truther out there named Christopher Bolin, Bollyn, and he has a couple books out, mostly kind of like repackaging his books into new editions. And his claim was that 9/11 truth, the biggest thing you need to look for is that the Israeli Mossad was behind it, that 9/11 was planned by the Israeli Mossad. And he also accuses another 9/11 truther named Webster Griffin Tarpley, who wrote the book 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA, of being what? A disinfo agent, someone who was writing that book for the sole purpose of trying to persuade people not to look at the Israeli Mossad. I mean, I was listening to the stuff from Michael Collins Piper, and I'm like, this is almost coming out textbook. It's almost the exact same theory, just substituting the JFK film from Oliver Stone with the book 9/11 Synthetic Terror from Webster Tarpley. And when Daniel Pipes put out his book Conspiracy in 1997, he made the big claim that it is very difficult to determine the origin of some of this material because a lot of conspiracy theorists use the same narratives over and over again, and they are very template oriented. They are very formulaic. And as we just said, like, this person is saying something that is contrary to the agenda that is being argued by the theorist. So therefore, they must be promoting the agenda of somebody else. And it's like somebody is saying something that a person doesn't want to hear. Therefore, they must be saying it on behalf of the villain, no matter who it is. I mean, people do this all the time. But I will be very clear. This whole thing about how a conspiracy theory is a conspiracy theory, therefore it is wrong, I don't accept that at all. Sometimes conspiracy theories turn out to be true. And this is another thing that they brought up during these discussions about John F. Kennedy and Oliver Stone with his JFK film. First and foremost, they said that it was a good thing to have a film that is talking about oddities in the Kennedy assassination, or what they would even view like challenging the magic bullet theory and such, or shooter from the grassy knoll, looking at how certain things could have gone wrong, looking at different types of theories. And what they said was, it's good that Oliver Stone made that film so that people now started talking about that on a mainstream level. And when we did our first upload about JFK here on this channel, I was like, I was really putting forward the case that the media has not forgotten about the Kennedy assassination. There's an enormous amount of talk about the Kennedy assassination. It is something that perhaps people just will not let go. I do not think that people have forgotten about it. And, Oliver Stone perhaps reinvigorated a certain sense of not only curiosity, but as one person put it during the discussions, I believe his name was Bob on the Michael Collins Piper show, when he was saying that it is a problem, and a problem that can be solved. Meaning like kind of like a math problem, like you can actually find out what happened. And this is one of the reasons why people turn to things like true crime, as well as other events that we can discuss. It's not so much only trying to tear it apart from an argumentative standpoint about why you don't like this idea. There is a definitive answer about what is going on, and people want to try and uncover that. I would refute one of the claims, though, in just simply saying that this is a good thing that Oliver Stone made the film about JFK, because I would really find that it almost compartmentalizes the concept of conspiracy theorism in general. And people are going to be like, okay, well, you're going to be talking about how something could be going on behind the scenes. There could be this overlooked piece of information. You're a conspiracy theorist. And this becomes an enormous rebuttal by the people on CNN, as well as the other cable news networks. They simply say that, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist or you're a conspiracy nut. The term conspiracy nut should not exist in our vocabulary, because just because somebody is talking about a conspiracy theory, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. What really is a conspiracy? On this channel, we use the definition: two or more people plotting and planning something, usually for a malicious reason. That can turn out to be true. And what we want to do is want to find out, is there any case that is going on with something like the Kennedy assassination or 9/11? And I said that I was rather disappointed that they were just using this very template-oriented structure, simply saying that, okay, this person made a film and this person wrote a book, and they excluded any possibility of the Israeli Mossad being involved. Therefore, they must be working on behalf of the Mossad. I mean, the reason why I have a problem with that is maybe they don't believe that the Mossad was involved in the Kennedy assassination or 9/11 truth. Maybe they want to come at it from a different way. Or, I mean, maybe the person simply does not agree with what you're talking about. Therefore, they have to be a type of disinfo agent. And there's another type of model that is going to be talked about a lot in conspiracy theories. As I was listening to the episodes as well, there's an individual named Yitzhak Rabin who would go on to become a future prime minister and of Israel. Yitzhak Rabin was somebody who was in the United States of America at the time of the Kennedy assassination, and I learned about this for the first time, that he was in Dallas at the time of the Kennedy assassination, the future prime minister of Israel. And as for motivations, if this is the first one that you've heard, we've talked about several of them. First and foremost, I got to stop saying first and foremost all the time. I got to have another introduction. To begin, we would say that John F. Kennedy was against the Israeli nuclear program. That's been talked about a lot. You can find lots of things about that on the internet. Also, Israel wanted to establish a new connection to the United States of America because Eisenhower was mostly not exactly anti-Israeli president, but turning his back on Israel, just rather indifferent to the situation. I mean, it's possible he had some type of feeling, but that would almost be like parapsychology at this point, so we shouldn't speculate too much. But they wanted to view the Kennedy assassination as a new fertile field to grow a relationship with the United States of America, and it appeared that John F. Kennedy was not playing ball. Now, also, when we want to talk about connections to Israel, one of the points that I think is almost just mixed into the subject is the role of organized crime or the mafia. When we did our second upload, we were just reading off some of the info about a Gallup poll that talked about who was behind the Kennedy assassination. If indeed a conspiracy took place, who was responsible? And we're just looking at what other Americans think and what they have to say. And the top one on the list was the mafia. But the thing is, though, one point that perhaps could be genuinely neglected by the media is there is a Jewish connection to the mafia, Israeli mafia, and definitely organized crime syndicates. And in the past, I think that these things were perhaps not as well publicized or well known in the United States of America. Right now, we're hearing about a lot of things like when I did the upload on Meyer Lansky, New World Order connections, someone even just said, something about that I meant to say in the upload, talking about Boardwalk Empire, but they just left a comment. I love watching Boardwalk Empire because they talk about Meyer Lansky and such. People are becoming more aware of Jewish crime syndicates. And that doesn't mean anything about being Jewish. I mean, we talk about the Italian crime syndicates, the Irish crime syndicates, the Russian crime syndicates. These things are very real and they are very present. And there is a lot of interaction in between the crime syndicates and politicians, as well as the directors of the security agencies. And I know that this is a fictional show, but if you ever watch the show Ray Donovan, they talk a lot about how crime families and criminal operations can just have the director of the FBI on speed dial and they start going back and forth. Okay, how are we going to solve this situation? I know that that's a fictional show, but they're trying to reiterate a point, or they're trying to share a specific idea. So we could see something like that. As far as Israeli connections in that, you're going to talk about organized crime, then there definitely are Jewish crime syndicates, and that's what a lot of people believe that Jack Ruby was supposed to be involved with. The only other thing I would like to say about Yitzhak Rabin is he actually went on to pass away from what? Assassination And there's a whole set of conspiracy theories about him as well. And I don't mean to read off too much of Wikipedia, but there's just the conspiracy claims that we have over here about Yitzhak Rabin is that the police report states that gunpowder was found on Rabin's body and clothing, suggesting that he had been shot at point-blank range, as gunpowder only travels a few inches, meaning that somebody shot him close by. We even talked about the William Greer theory with JFK on this channel. And Yitzhak Rabin would have walked away from the gunshots that killed him in a manner inconsistent with gunshots, that an impossibility if they had shattered a vertebrae. This thing is also getting a little bit more to the Kennedy assassination. Here's one, though, about a motorcade in the death of Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin's motorcade took 22 minutes to arrive at the hospital, even though he had a highly experienced chauffeur and the streets were cordoned off. The distance between the crime scene and the hospital is a 5-minute walk. So then it's just like a whole slew of conspiracy theories are going on about the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, the prime minister, which took place on November 4th, 1995. And in the 1970s, Yitzhak Rabin would go on to become prime minister. In the 1960s, they said that he was in Dallas, 1963, on the day of the Kennedy assassination. What is the significance of that? That's the point that I would like to say. A lot of conspiracy theorists like to use this as a type of template model when they say that, oh, this person and that person were in the vicinity at the same time. This person and that person were nearby, therefore they must have conspired to have X, or they must have been thinking about Y, or they must have wanted this end result to happen. How do we know that? What I can say is that I'm kind of disappointed that they would even propose that there is a connection. Just because two people were in the same city at the same time of a tragic event does not mean that there is any plotting and planning going on for a malicious reason. End of story. A lot of conspiracy theory literature would be really structured around many of those claims, and I would find that it would be a little bit difficult to tackle everything piece by piece. And perhaps one of the things that we could do in the future is actually challenge some of the claims of Christopher Bolin in 9/11 Truth, as well as 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA. Look at some of those things. We did do one upload about that, and that's available on this channel called Webster Tarpley, Genius or Fraud, where some people talk about more of his theoretical arguments, and we go through that piece by piece. But the big thing that I would like to say is just that a lot of the info that people are going to be putting out about conspiracy theories is speculation, but there is an end to the rabbit hole. Because as that guy Bob that we were just talking about was saying the thing about how it's about solving a problem, guess what? He's right. There is a way to actually find out, was the Israeli Mossad involved? And I would say that if there's going to be any type of organized crime discussion involved in the death of JFK, one point that I would like to just share after learning just a little bit about this, just testing the waters more or less with the Kennedy assassination and possible Mossad connections, it is that the organized crime syndicates probably are connected to the Mossad in a variety of ways. And even one point that is heavily neglected by a lot of the discussions that you would have in a high school classroom, when you talk about crime families and criminal operations, that also should include things like the Jewish mafia. I was even thinking about this. If you were just to go up to somebody and just start talking to them about the Jewish mafia, the Jewish crime syndicates, they might laugh at you. I really do not believe that these are completely well-known and well-accepted ideas throughout the entirety of the world. I mean, if you're going to talk about an Italian crime family, people have seen the movie The Godfather. They wouldn't think twice about that. You want to talk about Irish crime families and such, and just how they function? People have seen those in many different movies. But I really don't know if they would think about that if you're going to talk about the Jewish mafia and such. Right now, I would like to jump over to an article from the Jerusalem Post called Death and Destiny in Dallas by Stuart Weiss. In a sense, we grow up on a particular day. Many of us grew up on the day in which John F. Kennedy was assassinated. There are certain seminal events which are burned into our memory. On a personal level, it might be a wedding, the birth of a child, or usually the first child. Sadly. Oh, that's kind of bitter and sardonic. On a collective level, it is usually reserved for some type of momentous act, which defied reality, shocked us, or changed us in a significant way. The assassination of Anwar Sadat in 1981, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is, the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, or in 1986, the Space Shuttle disaster in 1986, or the murder of Yitzhak Rabin in 1995, the one we were talking about. But for me, such a moment existed 50 years ago, the murder of John F. Kennedy when he was killed in Dallas. Though I was only 10 years old at the time, and I was kept home from school because of the flu, I remember the sensation as if it were yesterday. A cloud hung in the air as the adults around me walked about in a zombie-like fashion, as if in a daze, as if their whole world had come crashing down. At dinner, my dad cried incessantly. His tears fell into my mother's chicken soup. I found his reaction strange because Dad had been such a lifelong supporter of the Republican Party, and John F. Kennedy was a Democrat. Dad, why are you crying? I asked. I thought you didn't like Democrats. Dad looked at me, and I couldn't decide whether he was going to spank me or school me. Luckily, he chose the latter. Son, he said softly, our president is dead. Dead today. Every American has been wounded. Today there are no Republicans or no Democrats. There are only Americans. JFK's murder was not just a national tragedy. It was an international tragedy. It was a turning point in history. While other presidents have been killed in office, JFK's shooting happened in the age of mass media, instant communication, and live broadcasts on TV. Although the actual assassination was captured only on a home camera, the famous Zapruder film, the subsequent arrest of assassin Lee Harvey Oswald, Oswald's own capture and murder 2 days later, and they left out Jack Ruby's name from this. I think that's kind of interesting. Lyndon Johnson swearing in as the new president and Kennedy's somber funeral were all displayed on the screen before an audience of hundreds of millions. As such, it touched an entire world, and which was captivated by its drama and darkness. The 1950s and early 1960s were happy days, a time of innocence and simple pleasures. JFK had brought a new spirit into the White House, into the country, if not the entire Western world. At age 43, he was the youngest man to ever be elected president, blessed with a charisma and unique and authentic style that had movie star looks and a quick smile and a witty sense of humor. JFK vowed the crowds everywhere he went, from Berlin to the backyards of America. This star of a prestigious political family, Kennedy and the Kennedy clan, were about to become as close as the United States comes to royalty. Jack, as he was called, held an unimpeachable pedigree, yet he was far from being a conformist. He would become the first Catholic president elected as a chief executive. Chicago was my hometown, and that played a crucial role in JFK's election. It was there that Kennedy had defeated Richard Nixon in their first televised presidential debate. Years later, I would go on to serve and work for a decade, both in congregations in Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas, DFW, or the Metroplex, as it is known. So what I would just say that that's kind of someone just sharing some things about John F. Kennedy, and I would just like to say that they have one final thing here. Violence and vigilantism became a part of our life. The Camelot of the Kennedys morphed into the mistrust of leadership and the cynicism of dashed dreams. Hope in a better day mixed with the fear of what might lurk in the shadows and what might be around the corner waiting for us. Just there. Okay, thank you to that article from the Jerusalem Post, just sharing some sentimental feelings about John F. Kennedy and the assassination. And what I would just like to say kind of in conclusion is there are going to be a lot of theories that people are going to be putting out, but let's also look for the patterns in which these conspiracy theories form. And let's remember that there are going to be different ways that people look at history. But let's try to find out what actually happened with these events. And also, what did the high school history classrooms leave out? All right, well, that's all for me now. Everybody have a good night, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow and see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast, IGTV, BlackBoxNed88. That's all for me now. Until next time.